You are now listening to the I Think I Love My Wife podcast. And this is your best friend's best friend, Chidozie Okafor, ready to take you on another journey. Are you with me? Because I'm ready. Let's get it. This episode is sponsored by Nello Effect, a coaching and consulting service that helps people turn mindfulness into action as they navigate the dating world as well as their relationships. Follow on Instagram at Nello.Effect and find more information in the episode description. Today we talk about recovering from a breakup, listening to your gut, the scary part of giving up control, and the benefits of seeing a therapist, especially after a long-term relationship. Hey, what's going on? This is Chidozie here for another episode, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with a good friend that I met on my journey to business school. I wouldn't say he gives me big brother vibes, but it's more like wise brother vibes. I think we're very similar in how we think about things, even though he's a lot more chill than I am. But I've always appreciated his perspective because I think he's a very reflective person, and he's always given me like really good and wise advice. And so I'm happy to have him on. I was around when he was dating his partner, and so to see that they're still married past COVID and with children is a blessing, and so happy to have him on. Say what's up, Julian.
Hey, what's up, man? Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So we're just gonna get started. Or before we get started, I always forget to do this, but I always want to toast. And so today I want to toast to just the connections that we make and the beauty of maintaining them without having like to talk all the time, because I think that's special when you can just pick up where you left off. So cheers to that and doing that. So first off, before I get into the specific questions that I gave you, I'm big into the mental health space. And so I just want to see, how are you doing? Like, how are you feeling? There's a lot of stuff happening in the world. You got children, you got a wife, you got a job. Like, how is Julian feeling right now?
Man, that's a great question. Things are definitely moving. We got a lot going on. All in all, we're doing well. But with 2 kids and one that just recently came 9 weeks ago, it is stressful. So I'm always mindful with my wife right now to just kind of take time to reflect. So we'll, unplug a bit for the holidays and be home and be together, which I think will be great. And so excited to do that and really just spend time as a family. And so, definitely could be better, but excited to go into the holidays with the family and able to really, think about 2021 and get ready for 2022.
Cool. I appreciate that. I feel like you gave me a not generic answer, but there's some areas I want to dive a little bit deeper in as we get through. Because I think as a man, even you were saying in your response are we, and I want to know how you are. And I think as men, we tend to focus on our responsibilities more so than ourselves. And I'm trying to emphasize that, not to be selfish, but we got to take care of ourselves, make sure we're our best self so we can do the best for the people that we care about. But we'll get into that. First question, I want to know, like, how long have you known your wife?
I've known my wife for 9 years so far.
And so how long did you know each other before y'all started talking?
Yeah, we met in 2012, and we met kind of randomly at a bar in a very popular drinking establishment in Ann Arbor. But I won't call her name out because they're not paying you as a
yeah, that's fine. They don't need the plug.
No free plugs. And so we met in 2012. Dated from about 2012 to 2015, so almost 3 years. Got married in 2015.
Got it. Before I ask my next question, speaking of plugs, before we started, you told me you were drinking a whiskey rye from a distillery in Louisiana. Let's give them a plug because it's a black owned.
Yeah, shout out to Exclave Spirits Company. They have a rye and a bourbon that just recently came out, so I'm drinking batch 1. They also won some awards recently. Look them up, Exclave Spirits. My guy Andrew been holding it down. A New Orleanian that's trying to build out some good moments through spirits in the city.
So I'll make sure I get the information in the sites to put it in the description. So if you're in New Orleans, you can check them out. I'm sure they do tours and things of that nature.
We
But
shipping go. They
and they
shipping
ship
nationally
globally,
too.
yeah. So
We
I'm
shipping
gonna have to
nationally.
figure. I have to talk to Andrew about getting the bottle so we can plug them for real next time we talk. But you said you were with your wife. You guys dated for 3 years before you proposed, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Was it when you guys met? I guess a lot of people are always interested. How long were you guys kind of talking before you made it official?
When we met in business school, we were both out of serious relationships. For me, it was like 3 years prior. For her, I think it was a couple years as well. And what we learned was that we were dating people that were kind of similar to us, but very different from the two of us individually. And so we initially kind of skirted into it and kept it low key. So we dated for probably, or we kind of talking for, I'd probably say 3, 4 months. And then we made it official, kind of had a coming out party at a party
Mm-hmm.
that everyone realized that we were dating. And so then I would say from we met in September, so probably right at the end of the year, we made it official. And so when we hit the next year, 2013, I think everybody was well aware that we had locked each other down.
Got it. Cool. So I want to talk about that in a little bit, but I want to get through some of the more contextual questions before we do. And so if I do the math, so you guys been married 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, we just made 6 in September.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what do you do for a living?
Yeah,
Generally, not to give like the details of your company.
I'm in tech, man, and product, specifically focused on education technology right now.
Dope. And what does your wife do?
She is a attorney, primarily focused in civil rights and social justice.
Cool. Well, we need that, so I appreciate it. And so I always think that understanding people's family construct is helpful for giving context to how people may think about things or their perspective in certain situations. So I always love to ask, what was like the marital status for you and your wife growing up of your
My
parents?
parents,
Yeah.
yeah, my parents are still married. They were married. They got married when I was about 6. And so they're still married now. Live here in Louisiana. My wife's parents were divorced, but very close. They live pretty close to one another. So she always spent time with both parents and grandparents and things like that.
Cool. And then we talked about it. You have 2 kids. You said a 9-week-old, and how old is your other child?
My oldest son is 3, about 3.5 almost, and yeah, 9 week old, man. So we're back in the thick of things.
So into the thick of it. Does he? Is the newborn a boy or a girl?
Yeah, 2 boys.
Got it.
So my wife's dreams of having her little AKA and all that stuff is slowly being dashed right now.
We're gonna talk about future plans, but 'cause I know that's a separate conversation. And so you mentioned you guys met pretty much right off of a serious breakup, and I remember you telling me that like, yeah, you were out planning to live your best life, not expecting to meet someone like her, and then y'all kind of on a turn up kind of situation you recognize you met a good person, and that developed into where you have now. Can you I guess talk me through like your mindset when you were like get out of the breakup? How long were you out of it, and then going out and then meeting her? What mindset were you in at the time?
Yeah, man. To kind of go back to it, flashback to 2009, sorry, and I was fresh out of undergrad, really making some money for the first time and got into a relatively serious relationship immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So got off the streets very quickly. And then got into a relationship that was cool initially, but realized the person was just like me. And the one detriment of that is like I tend to hold emotions and kind of harbor that stuff. And having someone else who does the exact same thing is just not healthy because eventually that builds up and one person explodes.
Yeah.
And then the other person is like, well, I'm not going to let you just explode on me. So I got to too. So you end up in this very toxic kind of situation after a while. And so by the time I started graduate school going into 2012, we kind of knew it was ending. And I wanted to focus on, new year, new Julian kind of thing.
Yep.
And, was really ready to get after it. And
Lived your best
so,
life.
exactly, man, live the best life, go to graduate school, which is the new undergrad, as they say, and do it all over again. And so when I went out that fateful evening, my friends, my roommates, we were ready to get after it. And so just so happened I met her, and we immediately connected and exchanged numbers, got the digits at the club, exchanged
That's the
numbers
move. Yeah.
all the time, right? Liquid courage makes you smooth sometimes, man.
Bro,
It's
it makes me a
uh,
lot smoother.
right.
I'm like,
Uh,
damn, what did I say?
yeah, I can't repeat. I can't repeat that when I'm sober. So, but yeah, so we got the digits, we texting, um, and decided to ask her out on a date, man. And so I think the thing where what hit me was that I had these best laid plans, but like there was something about her that like, okay, I want to see, let's see where this goes. And we ended up going on our first date. And I don't know how many first dates you've been on, but that was my first one in a while.
Yeah.
And so I'm asking my friends, like, what do you do? Like, how do you, make this happen? And they gave me terrible advice. Just
What they say?
listen, man, no, man, you gotta like, don't do anything. Let her start, let her lead, or you do these types of things. And it just was bad. And so eventually I just Googled it. It's like, break the ice, right? Like, just break the ice.
That is the Julian action. Let me just Google
Yeah.
what to do on this
So,
date.
I thought of a joke. I can't remember what that joke was. I'm glad I didn't have to use it because, to my wife's credit, she broke the ice.
Nice.
She came in to the restaurant we were meeting in, and I'm ready for my joke, man. And she's like, "I have a confession."
My man's like, I've been
So I'm
practicing
thinking,
this.
like, you got a confession? Like, I barely know you. Did you just run into my car in the parking lot, or you were an axe murderer or something? Like, I don't know where this can go. And she was like, I don't know your name. Like, I just don't know it. I don't have it in my phone. I don't know it. And come to find out, I also didn't know her name.
Oh,
But
really?
I'm a very subtle person, so I was just gonna ask her how to spell it
Yeah, that's
and
smart.
put the digits in, right? And so we exchanged names, and from that moment on, man, we were connected, and so that broke the ice. Let us talk a lot about who we were, what we were doing, and I came to realize that she was just very outgoing, which is something that I think I needed, like was something I didn't know I wanted, but it's something I needed in my
Hmm.
life, and that kind of is what pushed us to that next level of having very opposite attractions going on, to where we can kind of yin and yang throughout our life's journey.
Cool. I want to talk about that yin and yang, because I think about that too in a partner, and everybody has, you know, what they envision as the right partner, even though like it might not be the best thing for us. So I want to get to that, but before we do, you mentioned you had gotten out of a relationship and she gotten out of one. People might say, especially if you've been in long relationships, and then even you not really as an adult, just getting the, I would call the single experience to really see what you like and not like, or as some might say, get it out of your system.
Mhm.
Do you think that, and you can use your specific relationship or just in general? I guess my question is like, how important is it to heal and find yourself when you've been like cleaved to someone for so long?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so I think in my situation, in the previous relationship, we were on and off. And so in one of those periods that we were off, I think that I took that time to like really figure out what made me happy. And so I remember promising to myself that like no more was I gonna like compromise and walk on eggshells for anybody. And then me and that person got back together, and I think she noticed it immediately that
Hmm.
it was just like, oh, you're just not putting up with that. And so I think the thing for me, and I think what's healthy is, at some point you got to figure out what makes you happy. I mostly used the time that I was, separated from that initial relationship to kind of figure that out. And so I knew what I didn't want to have happen. And so by the time me and my now wife got together, I think that's what made us somewhat cautious at the beginning, because when I say she was fresh out of a relationship, like also a couple weeks out of a relationship as well.
Yeah.
So like we were coming in, we were jumping in
Head
very
first.
aggressively at that point, head first. And so we cautiously walked into it, and we had some hiccups, right? Like we kind of broke up a little bit every now and then, and just kind of like we're trying to figure it out. But I think the thing that stuck to me is that like you can have this plan of like I'm gonna have a year, like semester at sea and do my thing, all this stuff. But then when you meet the right person, you just kind of know, and you got to go for it. Even if it feels you got to take that leap.
Even in that, so when you thought about, and I know, I would say, hearing that, I know for guys, for men and women, sometimes people will say how we recover and deal with things are different. Some guys will say he may not deal with it head on, and his way of dealing with it, like I can just get back and start dating, even though he may not be mentally ready for that. Where women sometimes or often will take that time, for lack of better words, more in the relationship, recover and then choose to jump back in. So on your end, were there any concerns knowing that she just got out of a serious relationship to that she was ready or this might be just a rebound?
Oh man, I think two things. One, I strongly believe we both were rebounding at that point in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that we both initially interpreted it that way. But then as we kind of continued to hang out, we're like, oh, this is not fake. This is like not a fleeting thing that we just stumbled
Got
into
it.
that's gonna like get cool. This actually is a thing. And so I think we both with expectations of like this might be a rebound, and then it just kind of every day it just kind of like it's like going to work every day. It just you got up and we
Mm-hmm.
went to work again. It was like, oh, okay, I'm getting used to this. I'm getting my 401k. I'm making my moves right, and so I'm getting promoted right. And so I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is we both were in relationships that I think
Mm-hmm.
we knew should have been done before,
In it. Yep.
and we kind of started doing our mourning well before the relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
like getting ourselves prepared to end it to a certain extent. And so for me, for example, I knew that relationship was going to be ending eventually, and so I kind of just like got a counselor, like having conversations about it, like figuring out like what was happening and like why things are ending, why things weren't, were good, were bad, whatever. And I kind of like was
Yep.
okay with it. Like once it ended, it was just like okay, like I expected it and I was prepared for it, so it's fine. And so I think along the same lines with the two of
Good.
us
Did you make the decision
in
to
that
end it
situation as
the
well.
last time?
Actually, I think a roundabout way, yes and no. I think it just got to a point where we're on the phone and was like, I think you're in one place, I'm in one place. We should just be done, right? And it's like,
Mutually
yeah, I think you're right.
mutually
Like, I think this.
agreed upon.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, like, obviously, I want to be the one to say, yeah, man, I just nipped that in the bud. I was so well thought out at that point, but no, it was like,
Yeah, no, I mean it's not easy to, especially if you've been with someone,
yeah,
for so long. What about your wife? Do you know if she ended it
she
or
did, she did. I remember us having this conversation when we decided that we were a lot past rebound status. Like, hey, where are we?
we've been promoted?
Yeah, right. Like, where are we? And we talked about it as well. And so
Yeah.
she also ended that relationship.
And the reason why I ask, I think the recovery sometimes is harder when you are caught off guard by the breakup. When someone
Yeah,
like chooses to break up with you, you don't have the time to go to go through those emotions. I would say because I think in general, if you care about someone to or at least respect them to some degree, and you've been involved with them for a degree, and you're not doing it just off of pure emotional reaction, it's hard to break up with
that's
someone
true.
unless they've done something, cheated on you. Even cheating is hard, but it's hard to break up with someone. And so I think there has to be a point where mentally checked out to be in a space where you are able to do it. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah,
I think it's important to caveat that. So when people are thinking about it, I think the rebound or the ability to move forward is different sometimes when you made the decision and had the time to figure it out. It's like someone asking, like, what are we doing? It's
yeah,
like, well, you thought about that for a while before you asked me on the spot. And I
yeah.
don't even know how I want to answer that. And so I think when you don't know it's coming and it comes, it can be hard because now you have to start going through those series of emotions and things of that nature.
Yeah, and I also think that like a lot of times we don't listen to just kind of like this internal clock that we have and this internal
Mm-hmm.
voice that we have that like in situations you something is telling you that something's off or like you're not feeling it all the way. And so if you ignore that voice for a lengthy amount of time, I think when it does come to the end and you finally listen to it, you're like, oh, like I should have listened to this a long time ago, right? Like, and so now,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm so stubborn, and it's not it's not even stubborn, so to speak. I'm so goal oriented and driven in terms of once I've set my mind to something. It's a blessing and a curse because when you hit adversity with things that you're working on, you could push past it to keep working towards it or fighting for it. In relationships, is not always great because there might be the realization, but like I said, I want to make this work, and so you're still trying to make something that, like you said, in the back of your mind, or there's been very obvious reasons for you to get out of it. Still, it feels like failure in a sense.
yeah,
And I've definitely been in that. I'm probably a person that I'm slow to get into them because I know I'm slow to get out of them.
that's fair.
Because once I've decided like this person is worth that energy and work, I definitely don't want to have the sentiment like, oh, what if I did this and what if I did that? And sometimes you don't need to do the what ifs. Like it wasn't going to work.
Yeah,
and that's something I'm working to be better on. I'm not there yet, but
yeah, in that sense, I tell people a lot that one of the big things for me was I had to realize I had to lose control.
bruh.
And I like control. I like to know what situation I'm walking into and how I can kind of manage it. But the one thing that you realize, you cannot control another person. So like no matter what your goal oriented self wants it to be, if the other person is on a whole different wave, then it doesn't matter, right?
Oh, for sure.
So I think that's the big thing that in dating and getting ready for marriage and all these other things is some ability to accept that there are going to be things that happen that I cannot control. I just have to react, and I need to be ready to react and be okay with, whatever happens from that perspective. And so I tell people all the time, like, I used to, man, I can tell you a lot. I used to like really be stressed out of trying to control situations. Now I got, once you have, I guess you have a kid, you realize you can't control it.
Yeah,
So you just,
I hear that a lot. And one of the guys on the very first two episodes of the podcast said that, and he basically, I mean, I've known this guy since I was an undergrad, so he was one of my best friends. And he was saying like people like you and he talking about himself and me, we and I would imagine you yourself included, we thrive off of having control because we can see what's coming, we can plan for it, we can execute to achieve the things that we want. And so not having that control is very hard, especially in a relationship, because to the same point you just made, you can't control what that person does. And even on top of that, and I think that's probably the scariest part of a relationship for me, it's not that I need to be a control freak, but it's the fact that knowing someone has the ability to impact me in a way that I can't control how I then move. Not that I'm going to blow up, but like someone can have a bad day and that can impact me more than if I was having a bad day, and then that changes what I'm not able to go focus on because now I'm very much centered on that, and giving that level of control to someone without like feeling very comfortable they're not going to mismanage it. And sometimes they don't control, they can't control it. It's not like intentional all the time, but that's hard for me to relinquish from it's just hard to relinquish because it prevents me sometimes from doing and being as I would say efficient as I want to be at times.
Yeah, and I think it's defensive as well, right? Because
for sure,
this person the control, and that person can hurt you with that control.
Oh yeah,
and so your defense mechanism is buzzing like, oh, whoa. Let me see how I can control the situation so I can reduce the risk that I get hurt. But that's not how it works. Right? It works in a way that you give it up and
see where the marbles fall.
How that person reacts. And you might just have to like we might just be sitting here drinking, and that's
have another conversation. No, I totally agree. I think in the midst of a relationship, it is definitely more about how I know people can impact me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I care hard for people that I care about, friends, family, relationships. I think in the beginning is definitely like I don't want to be so vested and without, I won't even say guarantees, but knowing that you're in this as much as I'm in. And so I think in the beginning I move slow because I just need to know that I trust how you move. I trust how you're going to handle not even my feelings per se, but how you just handle others in general, how you move, because people do stuff in relationships I've seen to get to places they want.
Yeah.
And then once they get to whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, or what have you, then you start to see like their real
Hmm.
character as it pertains to you, you know.
Yeah.
And when you see how people, I've heard this and I believe how people treat their friends and how people treat other people, you get a testament of to who they are as a person, even when they're upset. You know how they're gonna act in those situations. So I try to, I try to pull for as much of that time as I can get
Yeah.
before we got to make some exclusivity type of arrangement, but or alignment. But I don't know if that's always the best move, but it's definitely tough because again, you know, the risk of the beauty of a relationship is that you're that ingratiated with someone, and you guys can move as a unit or working to move as a unit, and the things that come with that. But there's always a risk,
No.
and there's no actual. You know, I say this to women that ask me questions, and it's valid for men too. There's no way to minimize risk. You know,
Hmm.
being in a relationship and having the title doesn't prevent someone from cheating on you. Getting divorced, getting married doesn't prevent someone from ending the relationship. And so there's not a. You can try all the tactics, myself included, but there's not a way that you're going to prevent heartbreak. It's part of the game. It's part of. It's a reality of what could happen if you're choosing to put yourself out there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree, and I think that the one thing to think about too in my story is that with this relationship and going to get married, we leaped, right? Like we in logic, we probably should have waited, right? Logic, like
Yeah,
you should have taken your time to get over whatever you need to get over. I should have taken my time to get over whatever I need to get over. But what ended up happening in reality was that we met each other, we vibed, and we went for it to see what, like, at that point, we were like, what's the worst that can happen? We just got out of other relationships. So,
and we just start talking.
like, let's
do
just
you,
see what happens.
do you think it would have been different had you been in the like? Let's say this scenario happened in the real world, so not in grad school, and so the ability to see each other as often and spend time is very different. And there's a convenience that you all had. Do you think that both of you guys coming out of a breakup, meeting out, and then jumping in forward would have been as realistic or practical had the convenience of grad school not been there?
I think I would have, and I can't speak for her directly, but I think I would have been more cautious initially,
Mm-hmm.
just knowing the environment. And, it's one thing going to a place like that where I was new in town, right? Like it's like going being going to a new high school, right? Like you could be
Yeah.
whoever you want to be at that point. And so it's one thing doing that. It's another thing being in, like, let's say the same city I was in or whatever, where I had my routines and stuff like that. And I probably would have wanted to explore a bit more, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have been more cautious. But I think the thing that I learned, to your point earlier, was that you got to listen to sometimes you gotta listen to that feeling, and it's scary, and this could be bad. Like it can literally go bad, but you gotta be okay with it. And so I think it comes back to that for me of like after seeing how she moved and like how she treated everybody, I was like, she's a good person. So
Let's just see what happens.
worst case scenario, I can get my heart broken, but it's not like she gonna tear my mama down or anything like that.
Yeah,
She's a good
no, true,
person.
true. And I think someone told me I don't know if there's a book about this or someone told me this, but there's power in no, right?
Yeah.
And the funny part is, when we talk about business school, I would always tell people, finding a job is a two year journey. It's not just about the internship.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's better to find that no early, hear the no early, even though it may not feel great. When other people are getting their offers and stuff like that, if it helps point you in a direction of what's right. Like if you, for example, you could go do consulting if you never did consulting and realize, hey, that travel life is not for me.
Yep.
And whether it's a mutually determined decision or whether the company says, well, you're not for us, you can figure out where you need to pivot, especially where you have all of the, I would say, tools at your disposal.
Yeah.
Versus if you wait and then you figure that out later, and then you're like, it's not for me. Then it's like you don't have any, you don't have the resources to find a job like you would when you were in school. And so there's sometimes I think we fear the no and we fear the rejection, but finding that out quicker sometimes is helpful for us to get closer to where we're actually supposed to be.
Man, you connected this to like some of the best like tech principles, right? Like it's like agile
Oh yeah, you're right.
waterfall, right? Like you can wait all the way till you're done building this big old thing, realize it's a flop, right?
Yeah.
or you can build very small, see if people like it, or if you like it, and then iterate, make yourself better over time, or cancel it and you didn't put that much into it, right? So it's kind of the
Yeah.
same mindset.
No, you're right. And I work in tech on the product side too. And I never until you said that, I never thought about it that way. Um, and you know Justin. Justin was on season one, and he talked about his dating after the divorce,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about just our approaches were very different. I moved slower, and he was like, "No, I think you should just go all in very quickly to see." And I just wasn't getting. I wasn't just. I was like, "Bro, this is." I, I don't. I get what you're saying, but it just doesn't work for me. And as you said that, I I'm very rational, right? So like you can't half-ass that in tech, right? When you're trying to do a product and you're going in to say, "Hey, let's test it," you may have parameters around it, but you can't say, hey, "We're only going to spend half of what it costs to do that test."
Yeah, you're going to do it.
You gotta go in and spend what it costs to do it right.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do a survey to get the customer insights, you can't do one with a low end. Spend the money to get a good end or good number to really understand what the data, what customers feel.
Yeah, because you
And
can't
so
accurately make a decision fast without the data, right?
yeah,
You can't say like, "Hey, I know that the answer to this is Y," when you kind of didn't put the effort in to really justify if that's the right answer, right?
yeah. And I think as you say that, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like my problem is one. I think it's always tough having those conversations when you either realize that this person is I don't know how to say this without sounding negative. When there's always like, oh, you meet someone they're cute. There was like an initial connection, and as you learn stuff, either you become more attracted to them, or it's like whatever. When people start becoming more like whatever, and not you're not learning more that pulls you towards them, right?
Yeah,
And so they kind of stay in this middle bucket of like, I can hang out, but I'm not drawn to be like proactive about
yeah,
about spending time with them, right? And to me, my problem is cutting off when I'm like, this doesn't. I'm not compelled. I don't feel like motivated to go. It's just nice to have. But if you say I don't want to talk to you no more, I wouldn't lose sleep.
yeah,
I have a. I need to do better about cutting those off, and then those because in my head, the other side of me says, well, I say because when I get to that point where it's like whatever or we'll see where it goes, I know my effort level compared to all the things I have going on is a lot lower. So I'm not investing as much as I probably should in that relationship.
yeah,
But the other side of me says like, well, God's undefeated. And so there's a lot of times we've been in situations that didn't work out the way we wanted them to work out, and we were disappointed by it, but like we liked the fact that it worked out the way it did in retrospect.
that's true.
And so I try to create space for, well, this is not looking the way I want it to look, but it could if I give it time.
Yeah,
And what I'm realizing is that give it time is like me testing with the low end because I'm not actually investing the way that you probably should in a relationship to give it a chance to see like is it really going to pan out the way you want.
yeah, and you're running into all of the risk of that whole we talk about the acronym or stuff like that, but like waterfall model, right? Like the big risk of it is that you do all this time, you do all this small incremental resources, over this long period of time, and then you get to the end and it's a dud, right?
Yeah.
Instead of knowing that it was a dud 6 months ago, you over collection of time actually put more resources in it in that long period of time and could have been doing something else. But instead of knowing in 2 weeks, it took you 6 months to know.
True. No, you're right. I think in that explanation it makes sense. The way I've been looking at it was like, well, I'm not. I don't ever think I like the opportunity cost piece. I lose on that because it's not like it's putting something else in jeopardy. But you are right. You can invest a lot of a certain amount up front to figure out something, or you can invest what feels like it's a little amount over a longer period of time and actually invest more
Yeah.
in that than you thought you were. And so that's a good. For me personally, that's a good way to think about it. So I'm trying to do better. I am better by having the conversation around like, hey, this is where I see it. Proceed if you want to or don't.
Yeah,
But
and I think open, and then that's one other thing that me and my wife did initially as well was that we were pretty transparent about like at that point in our time in our life what we thought we were looking for.
yeah,
And if you were kind of on the bus, then come on. If you weren't,
yeah,
then like let me know now and we can not do this. And so It just so happened every turn we were deciding
Yeah,
we
y'all
all
still
like that.
together, and that's the beauty. That's the beauty of it when it works, right? And I think people say, at least the guys that I've talked to, one, when they knew, they knew, and then two, it's not that it's not, because people say like relationships shouldn't be, like dating shouldn't be that hard. It
Mhm.
shouldn't be that hard, and that doesn't decouple it from doing not requiring work. Like they
Right.
require work, but I think some of the things that you hear people talking, myself included, sometimes it's like it shouldn't be this complicated. Either y'all like fuck with each other and y'all want to see where it goes, or you don't. But I think sometimes when people are in the margins and you're not sure, you're like trying to like gauge all these other things that when you feel strongly about someone, those other things don't matter as much.
Yeah, and remember though, we're constantly growing, right? Like the things
Yep.
that you didn't fuck with 2 months ago or a year ago, that person could have changed without you separately.
Yep.
And you liked everything else except for this one thing. They went off, they figured themselves out, they did their thing, and y'all meet up again at a random coffee shop or whatever, and you
And
realize
they're not the same,
they're
right?
not the same. And so, like, I think being able to think about it outside of these like strict, rigid rules, because people are constantly changing, they're constantly learning something about themselves, they're going through stuff, and maybe they got some bad advice from a family member before that now they talk to somebody else like, oh, that's terrible advice, never do that, and they
Yeah.
realize like, oh, I've been thinking about this wrong, just like we talked about the product side of relationships, right?
Yeah.
That whole thing could have happened for someone, and you talk to them, 6 months later, you're like, oh, I like this vibe now. Like, this is a cool vibe. So I think the thing to me is always, being open to where people are at that moment, setting the right expectation, and then like seeing what happens. Because at the end of the day, if you're not willing to leap, it's always going to be a leap. No matter if the person feels like they are the perfect person, regardless, it's always going to be elite because you cannot control the other person. So you always leave
You are
yourself
you are
elite.
you are totally right. I think I am not the biggest fan of leaping unless I have certainties around how I feel.
Yeah, you can't.
But I think you're right, and you hit it on the nail on the head in that sense. Because like even I think I remember in college undergrad, girl that like we just vibed and gelled. She was coming out of a situation, and so I just didn't want to jump into something when you just coming out of that. And she was younger, and then time went by, we reconnected, but she was a very different person,
Mm,
and so that vibe that we had, it was just not the same. Like we still, had history and we're cool, but just like the ease of how we just and what was important to us and what we liked was just very different.
yeah,
And so I definitely can see that happening, when you give people time and as people grow and develop and change. Pivoting a bit, you said that one of the things you did after you ended the relationship is you got a counselor and you talked to someone. For men in general, but especially black men, that's not something that like I hear often. Like my experiences with counseling outside of my mother being a therapist has been like in relationships. And so to see someone recognize, one, I commend you to see that you're recognizing, hey, like this is tough, something that's difficult for me to navigate on my own, and seeking a professional to help you is commendable, especially at that time. Like, in 2000, I think now mental health and all those things are a little bit more mainstream and buzzwords, not in a bad way. But 10 years ago, I don't think that people were talking about it the same light. And so
yeah.
for you to be at a point where you recognize it, and you only being like 20,
24, 25.
24, yeah, very young, I commend you on that. What led you to make that decision and recognize like, hey, I need this? And then two, how was that experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I realized I needed to talk to someone is because everyone in my circle of folks would be like, "You'll be all right. Like, it'll be fine. Like, like you overthinking it. It'll be all right." I was like, man, I hear everybody saying that, and typically when most people give you a consistent answer, you're like, oh, okay, it must be me, right? Something must be going
Mm-hmm.
on. But I just never felt better, right? I just never felt better no matter how many people I talked to, and they said the same thing, no matter how many times we met up for happy hours, and it just kind of ended in that same conversation. And so for me, I needed to like go drastic. I'm a football fan, and I hate when my team, runs the ball when they're down by 30. At that point, just throw the ball. Like, what's the worst that
Yeah.
can happen, right? Like, so at me, I'm the type of person that's like, hey, if this is not working, and I've tried everything I can think about, let's just try something drastic and
Hmm.
talk to some random person and see what happens, right? And it was tough, right? Like you mentioned 10 years ago, it was not as easy to find
Oh yeah, I
resources,
could even
right? Like,
imagine
so
that.
like
Yeah.
I would talk to somebody. I actually remember talking to someone at HR at my company, like, how do you even? And so she kind of freaked out. I was like,
She's like, "What's happening at work?"
so like I stopped that conversation obviously, but I didn't like just start, going back to searching. I just start Google like how to find a therapist to talk to, and I found someone that obviously took my insurance, which was great. So found someone, was talking to this guy, and he was really cool, very different from me in all demographics, but was very cool in terms of like breaking down what the problem was, um, and helping me realize that like the feelings that you're feeling are fine. Like it is a normal emotional reaction, and it's okay to like go through that. And like
Hmm.
once he said that, it was like a weight. Like this is okay. Like I don't have to like break up one weekend, next weekend be out like where they at. That's not what
Yeah.
he said to do. He was like, it's cool. Like go hang out, go watch movies, go do whatever you think you need to do to like really feel happy yourself. Because if you can't make yourself happy, then you're never going to be happy figuring this out. It's just going to be constantly you disappointed. And so I
Hmm.
went through that phase, and he really kind of helped me ask the right questions. And the one thing that he mentioned to me that I think I never forgot, and I tell people all the time, was that in a year from now, you won't think about this. Like, I know it's
Yeah.
tough right now, but like, trust me, in 1 year, this thing will not be on your mind. You literally won't think about it. And just to be real, like probably 6 months later, I just never
You weren't even
thought
thinking
about
about
it. I
it.
didn't even like. I would have to remember, like, oh man, I was
That's when,
tripping.
that's when people. That's when people say like, "Oh, you're gonna laugh about this in like a year from now."
Yeah,
It's gonna be a joke.
and it's so true. The things that we stress about, right? Like the things that we think we cannot make it through and stress about. That with time heals all wounds to a certain
Oh, for
extent.
sure.
You just but the thing is, you got to let yourself heal. You can't force it. And I think what the problem is, people force it so much that it's a continuous cycle. So they always getting these little paper cuts.
Yeah, it's creating more disappointment.
Right. So you get these little
In
disappointment
essence.
paper cuts through the course of that year. So you always remember it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I do. I don't know if you know, but I do coaching and life coaching and stuff like that. And one of the things that I tell people is one, I'm never gonna question your feelings. I follow that philosophy in my personal life. Like, if I'm trying to argue how you feel, like it's a losing battle from jump
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not in a position to do that. But it's always okay to feel what you feel.
Yeah.
You know, and then the important questions is understanding why you feel the way you feel. Are you happy about how you feel? And then what do you want to do about that, right? And we live in this, whether it's how we date, how we shop, how we process this Amazon, era where we just used to instant gratification,
Yeah.
instant results, and all that. And so we think that in the sense of processing feelings and emotions and life circumstances, like we just want it to happen ASAP. And it just doesn't work. Like there's no computerized technology. There's nothing that's gonna change that the way that the human body and human beings process
Yeah.
stuff. And it takes time. It takes, understanding what you feel and going through that and actually feeling it so that it's like someone sharing something and getting off their chest.
Yep.
Like being in the midst of those feelings actually help you process it. But to your point, if you coming off a situation of disappointment or let's say adverse feeling, right, a negative feeling, and then you set an expectation in your mind like I should be over this by this week, and then the week comes, you just compound it. It might not be the same level of disappointment, the same reason for it, but the same type of feeling has just been created because you're like, damn, a week passed, I'm still on this. I'm disappointed now with myself that I haven't got past this. And that's part of why, doing the podcast is super important to me because I think in a lot of ways we don't talk about these things. And so we're all operating in isolation. We're listening to friends that are single, that haven't been through similar experiences because typically they're our peers, and they're telling us you'll be all right. or they're giving us bad single advice. Like, I would never do this, and it doesn't help us. And so the goal, with the podcast was to really share stories, share people's perspective, one of today, but also looking back in situations, ideally more mature, and hopefully people seeing like, oh, I've been through that before. I'm not the only one. Oh, here potentially is another way to navigate that I never thought of, or no one ever told me, And so I appreciate you saying that. The more that I hear men going to talk to professional, and me aspiring to become a professional therapist, it just affirms like it's needed in the community. And I just want to put a magnifying glass on that as much as I can, because there's a lot that we don't know as individuals, and the more that we treat other things like that, right? Like we talked about the home earlier. Like, you don't know what you want for your home, you hire an interior designer. Financially, you don't know certain things when it comes to finances. No matter how smart you are, you hire a financial advisor. The mental capacity of it and how we see our lives shouldn't be treated any differently, because we don't know the answers to navigating certain things that we're going through in our lives.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that for me, it's always, after having that experience, it helped me be very introspective now, and realize when something's off, right? And whether that's in career, whether that's in the relationship, whether that's in, my parenting style, whatever, I can now sense that, like, hey, you had this balance, something's off. Let's start trying to figure out what's off and go from there. And I think before that, I just, I was out here living. I was just unbalanced and living, man. And now I'm realizing that I know I need to strike certain balances in my life that, that may lead me to leave a job or do something different that I think I wouldn't have made those decisions in the past.
Nah, bro, I definitely get it. We all are always growing, and hindsight is 20/20. But I know we're at time. I appreciate it. Your time. I appreciated the discussion. And if you guys appreciated it, make sure you show me that by subscribing to the podcast and sharing this episode with a friend. You can always follow us at Think Love Wife on Instagram. Join us next time. I'm going to bring Julian back, and we're going to talk about dating with intentions, especially in this cold dating app world. So make sure you tune in. And like always, I hope the conversation keeps going.